And also, what project are you feeling stuck starting or finishing? I would love to hear that in the comments as well. So today we are talking about why waiting to feel ready doesn't work. So if you are like me and you've had times where you've said things like, I just can't get motivated, or once I feel ready, I will start. Or sometimes maybe I know what I should do, I just can't make myself do it. This is for you. So we are talking about motivation today and how motivation doesn't work the way that we think it works or that we were taught that it works. So this is a really important one. I hope that you enjoy this. So let me know in the chat area what project you are really just lacking that motivation and that getting started or finishing energy. I would love to hear what you're working on. In the comments, CJ says, I thought it was my computer. Nope, you are safe. It's all me. So Coral says, for her, it is purging old files. Yes, and clearing off my desk of the 2025 papers. Lori says, updating my long password list. Yep, absolutely. Suzanne says, still no sound here. Just give it a minute. Maybe you might be like kind of trying to catch up. Like sometimes the streaming is not quite as fast and it catches up. So hopefully it catches up for you, Suzanne. So we're talking today about motivation and how motivation might not work the way that you were taught that it works. And I know it does not work the way that I was taught that it works, and that all the things that I've been taught in my past. So we're talking about all those times where you just kind of feel stuck and the energy to get started or that motivation that gets you going isn't showing up, or it's not strong enough to get you moving. It's what's happening is motivation does not start our actions. Motivation is not meant to come first. So if you've been waiting for motivation and energy to happen before you get started on things, that is a huge chunk of why you're stuck, because motivation actually shows up later than we're taught to look for it. Motivation shows up after movement, after we've started taking some action. Now, I'm sure that you've heard some about, just get moving and you can keep moving. There's some truth to that, but there's so much more to it that we really need to actually talk about this, because it's something that is so misunderstood out there. So the belief that we're taught most of the time is, once I feel motivated, I will do the thing. So I just need to figure out how to get myself motivated. But what that quietly does in the background is it turns motivation into like a prerequisite, right? It's kind of like the gatekeeper. Nothing can go until you've got motivation. And then that turns it into a judgment about who you are. So we end up not getting that motivation. So we don't get started, or we can't keep moving. And then we think something must be wrong with me. And I can tell you right now, there's nothing wrong with you. Absolutely nothing. You're not lazy. You're not broken. You're not just an unmotivated person. You've just got it flipped around. So motivation, and I want you to remember this, motivation is a response. Responses happen after something happens first, right? So motivation is a response to something happening first. So something has to happen before motivation is ever going to show up. It is closely tied to dopamine, which is a chemical in our brain. That's the chemical that's the fun one. My favorite chemical is dopamine. It's that happiness, that energy, that I call it the party, the party chemical in your brain. But dopamine is very closely related to motivation. And brain chemicals don't just release on their own, right? They release because there's a trigger. So we need that trigger to happen to get that dopamine to release, which gives us that motivation and that excitement and that pride and that encouragement and all the stuff that keeps us going. So if motivation is closely tied to dopamine, how do we trigger that dopamine, right? How do we trigger that motivation to show up? Well, motivation shows up when your brain predicts that whatever the project is or the little task that you're doing, that was survivable and you could do it again. So it usually appears after you've interacted with something, right? You've started to work on a task, or you've opened the binder, or you've had a small experience of some sort. Your system learned nothing bad happened. I could survive this, so let's try a little bit more, right? Kind of like eating a new food, trying a new flavor of ice cream that you're not too sure about. So you hesitantly take that first bite and it's not that bad. So now you're willing to take some more bites, right? That's exactly how motivation works too. Motivation works with your ice cream or your new food that you're trying out. You get just a little bite to see that you survive it, and then motivation kicks in to have some more. Same thing with our tasks. So motivation is your brain's willingness to repeat. It's not permission to start. It has nothing to do with getting you started. It comes at the end, not the beginning of the process. So remember that motivation is the brain's willingness to repeat something it's doing, to repeat a process. It's not permission to start the process. So if this is something that is new to you, if you've not heard it going this way, let me know in the comments. I would love to hear if this is something that you've heard before or if this is news to you. CJ says, oh, I need this talk right now. My procrasta project is the pile of donations sitting near the front door. Get it out, right? Yes, 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 yes. Donna struggles with clearing my kitchen table once and for all. Oh, yeah, all of that. So that motivation, that feeling of being stuck, it's not lack of motivation that's happening. There's more to a process that happens before motivation can get there. So basically, if motivation is the brain's willingness to repeat instead of permission to start, that's why you might say sometimes, oh, once I started, it's not as bad as I thought. That's motivation kicking in. Motivation is not some big, overwhelming, exciting feeling at the beginning of it. Motivation is actually really subtle. It's this calm, almost sense of curiosity or almost sense of permission to keep going. But it speaks very quietly at first, and we nurture that to build it into that really exciting thing. So if motivation did not cause the action, right? Motivation created, or motivation, the action created motivation, right? Motivation did not cause the action, whatever that first step is that you took. That first step created motivation. Then a lot of times we fall into that trap of thinking, so I should just push myself harder to get started. I should just push myself harder to do the thing, and then motivation will show up, right? But that's not how it works. So if action is driven by urgency or pressure or self-criticism, if you're saying, I should be able to do this, and you push yourself to do it, then your brain learns that whatever that action is, that task, that project, that type of task that you're working on, it learns that that's a threat, right? It learns that that is not safe. That feels very stressful and uncomfortable, and it does not like it. So now it goes in the threat category. That's why sometimes you feel like you had momentum going and then you lost it. It was not lost. Your brain categorized that as threat now. So what does our brain do? Our brain protects us from danger. Our brain does not want to go towards something that's a threat. So if we have pushed ourselves to just get started on something and ignored all of the stuckness, ignored all of the things that our brain is telling us no, and we just push ourselves and we keep pushing ourselves to push through, then all that urgency, all that pressure, all that self-criticism, all that I should be able to just do this actually backfires on us, and it guarantees that motivation is not going to show up for us. And in fact, it's going to make it so much harder for us to get started to begin with. So, yes, action creates motivation, but the right action. It's the right action that creates motivation. So I want to talk a little bit about that, about what the right action is that creates motivation. But I want to head over to the comments really quickly. Lori says, I've been putting off going through clothes to let go of what I don't wear. I did pull out 6 items in a bag, but it's too cold to go out to Goodwill to drop it off. Yay, I love that you did that. That's fantastic. Hopefully, once you did that and you went through the process, hopefully you really felt lighter and excited about what you did and felt better. So you could put your brain into that this is not a threat mode and prove to your brain that, letting go of clothes is safe. Letting go of clothes is a good thing. When we do safe steps and prove to our brain that whatever the project is, whatever the task is, that it is safe, then that's what allows us to keep doing that. And that's what then grows motivation. So there's a small shift that I want you to think of that changes everything. All right. So your job is not to feel motivated. Your job is to make getting started less threatening. So your job is not to feel motivated. Your job is to make getting started and doing the little first steps of those tasks to make them feel safer, to make it easier to get started by making it not a threat in your brain. So when you make it safer and you create these small first steps that your brain does not see as a threat, then your brain can find success in them and see, oh, I did not die from that. We did pretty well. I think I can do more. And that's our goal, that I think I can do more. That's the beginning of motivation. So that's what we're going for. So in order to get there, the best way to get there is not to push yourself, no judgment, no shaming yourself. I should do this and I just have to push through. No, the best way is to create safe, smaller tasks. So you can prove to your brain that this is safe, and then your brain will release the motivation to do some more and keep trying. So how do you do that? Safe engagement without force looks like doing less than you think you should sometimes, right? Giving yourself just the safe amount to do. Or stopping on purpose, setting a stopping point that is well before your brain could start to get stressed or worry that it can't complete it. Touching something, starting something without finishing it. Practice not finishing things the first time that you touch them, because that gives your brain the safety to know that it's not going to be pushed, it's not going to be pressured, it's not going to be that horrible. And then your brain becomes willing to do it more. Or allowing an action to be boring or incomplete. I don't know about you, but for me, boring is like next to death. If it's boring, I had the hardest time doing it. That's why, for me, in order to prove to my brain that something is safe, I have to give myself super tiny, small starting bites that prove to my brain that I don't die from boredom. And then accepting instead of resisting if something is boring or if I can't complete it all at once and it has to be left open for a little while, right? So those are some ways to make safe first actions, safe first steps to then get our brain to relax and feel safe enough to give us motivation to keep going, whether it's keep going now or to be able to get started and go again in the future. So if you do some of these tasks, if you take some of these small steps, how do you know when motivation is kicked in? If it's subtle and it's not a big feeling, what is it? Motivation comes as quietly as, okay, I could come back to this. Okay, I could do this again. Okay, that wasn't that bad. Those phrases right there, that's your brain starting to release motivation. And if you push at that point and say, no, I've got to, since it's not that bad, I've got to do an hour of this, or I've really got to push through and finish, then your brain's going to pull that motivation right back and you're going to go right back to stuck. But if you allow your brain to finish a little bit early, be incomplete for a while, and not push it, then your brain will give you more motivation, and it will be even easier and easier the more you do it. So really quickly, I want to hop over the chat before we go back to this. Let's see. Melly says, right now I have a laundry basket piled high of clean clothes that need to be put away. I've been moving the basket off and on the bed for over a week now. Yeah, there's something about that your brain is saying, you know what, there's something unsafe. It's not trusting that process very well right now. So that is something where you need to build up some of that trust so that you can get the motivation, because the motivation will not happen until you built up the trust and taken a little action. Susie says, that makes so much sense. I can take small steps instead of trying to search for a day when I feel motivated to do a whole project. Absolutely. That's the best way to do it too, is doing tiny little steps to prove to your brain that it's not that bad, that you can be successful, that you won't get pressured and pushed too hard. It's not going to open up a whole lot more responsibility, right? So you can take these little tiny steps and your brain becomes more and more confident with it. And then each time you do it, it's so much easier to get started and it's so much easier to keep going. Sometimes you even surprise yourself and it becomes kind of fun doing whatever it was that you used to have a problem with. She follows it up with, but what about when you consistently not finish projects? It's easy for me to touch something and not finish it because that has been my pattern for 70 years. If that has been your pattern, then most likely that is actually a way that your brain is protecting you because it's not feeling safe with finishing projects or making progress on projects. So that's when you explore, how can I make this safer for my brain? It's not something that, there's a whole process, right? Of how our brain processes all of the different parts that lead to progress and motivation. We start with understanding. We have to create understanding, and then that works into creating safety. And safety is one of the most important parts in order to unlock easily working on, starting, finishing projects. So understanding, then safety, then comes clarity. Clarity opens up, and then comes movement. That little tiny small step that then proves to your brain, all right, I survived this. It was not that bad. I can do more. And that's when motivation kicks in. So understanding, safety, clarity, movement, then motivation. I actually just talked about this in our deep dive workshop series last night. So if you've not joined the deep dive workshop series, by the way, this is something I can't go as in depth into on a Thursday talk. It's just too complex for a Thursday talk, but it's so, so, so important. Last night, we really dove into the understanding and safety part of that framework of what our brain needs in order to get motivated and actually get moving and finish things. So if you find that you are, and the link to join is also in the, the description of the video. I'll actually, let me put it in the chat as well for anybody who's interested. We did our first live session last night. If you join, then you can still join the other live sessions. We do one a month, but you can also get the replay right away. So if, like you were saying, let me pull that up again. If, like Susie was saying, she says, what if you constantly not finish projects? That is actually a protection strategy that your brain uses because it's not feeling safe. So if that's your kind of your MO, then it sounds counterproductive, but deciding not to finish projects on purpose can actually boost your feeling of safety. Because I imagine, tell me if I'm wrong, I imagine right now you mentally sort of beat yourself up, consciously or subconsciously, about the fact that you don't finish projects. So you've unconsciously been making your brain feel very unsafe about working on projects because your brain expects failure and pressure about finishing projects, which then makes finishing projects extra scary. But if we take away that pressure and we make finishing projects not the goal, but making progress the goal, that can relieve the safety for your brain so much more. There's so much more that goes into this, and I really wish that I could just have an hour with you and tell you all about it because it's so fascinating. But yeah, so don't worry about it. It's not going to make you finish projects less if you purposely don't finish projects. It will actually help relieve that pressure. Tony says, boring and incomplete is so scary to me, just as much as starting sometimes. Yeah, you and me both. Like, boring is a kiss of death to me, and incomplete can be very frustrating. However, when I step back and I use that step of understanding, then I can really relieve that stress and urgency and all of the danger that seems to come up when I think about boring and unfinished, right? So that understanding step is what helps keep this from being like up here over your head anxious. And it makes it understandable and have compassion, and it releases all of that stress and anxiety that you're holding on to about it. So that way your brain can find the safety. Because if your brain does not find the safety, then it can't move forward without being super pushed. And then that's just kind of doing more and more damage, right? It's kind of like trying to push against a toddler, a 2-year-old who has, decided I'm not doing something. And the more you try to convince them, the more they're going to push back, and neither one of you is going to win. It's just going to be awful. So if your brain's that 2-year-old, then if we can create a way that your brain wants it, that your brain's like, oh, okay, well, actually, that looks kind of interesting. That's not that bad. Then that 2-year-old in your brain stops pushing back so much, and you can finally get it to do what you need it to do. So yeah, boring and incomplete is scary. And we need to reduce that fear, because that scariness is what keeps you stuck. Nancy says, oh no, she says, I need a new computer, but I'm putting off looking at the old one that's still on the desk, taking valuable real estate. And that one needs to be gone first. I keep saying I'm not ready. Yeah. So that's the examine. What's the fear? How does your brain feel unsafe about looking at that computer? Because if you can get your brain to safety and you can get it to some movement, then motivation can start to kick in and it can keep going. But until your brain feels safe, it's not going anywhere. You're just going to be battling the whole time. And that's very frustrating. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. I can't do it. Your brain says, you know what? You're right. You can't. And we don't want that to keep spiraling, because that's very frustrating. Lori says, I start one project and make good progress, but instead of going back to it, next time I want to work, I start a different project that I don't finish. Yep, protection strategy. That's along with, like Susie said, the not finishing. Another type of protection strategy is starting something different or working on something different instead of the thing that truly you do know is best for you to work on. And truly you do want to, but you feel very stuck. And in the moment, something else is much more attractive, and your brain will lie to you because your brain's not feeling safe doing whatever that project is that you really need to do. So your brain is, hey, look over there. That looks really urgent. Let's do that. Until you solve that safety problem, you're not going to be able to make a lot of progress with it. Minimalish Madonna says, she says, new follower, looking forward to and have marked this for several replays. This is so good. Thank you for the replay. Wonderful. I'm so glad that you're liking it. Welcome, welcome. I'm glad you're here. Yeah, Susie says, I asked her if she beats herself up for not finishing projects. She says, yes, I beat myself up a lot about it. That is human nature. Like, we all do it, but cut it out. That makes your brain feel less safe. And in the deep dive, I went into very much about how we can flip the script to give our brain some safety. But one of those ways is not beating yourself up, but giving yourself some compassion, that your brain does not feel scared of being beaten up if it doesn't finish, right? That's such a great observation about yourself, though, because now you have such important information that can truly help you get unblocked and keep moving. Donna says, I always feel bad about myself for not completing a project because I get overwhelmed by the project. Yes, and that overwhelm is your brain's red flag saying something feels unsafe. I'm not comfortable moving forward. So at that point, if you keep pushing, it's proving to your brain that it's not safe. And if you feel bad and give yourself a hard time about it, then it also proves to your brain that it's not safe. So we need to create that safe space for your brain that will reduce that overwhelm and create a kind of a method of when overwhelm shows up, this is how I calm my system so that I can move forward and get motivated and make this easy to move forward again. Because motivation, what we think of as motivation, can show up briefly sometimes. If you've ever had those days where you just feel really motivated and you start doing all of these different things and you make so much progress, you're just on fire. You've got the energy, right? And then it disappears. And that was not true lasting motivation. It's kind of like this burst of energy that's fueled more by fear and desire. And it can be a mix between the two, but it's kind of this fear and desire that can sort of bubble up and create this burst of energy, but it's not sustainable. So those are the days where you might, start organizing your closet. You pull everything out and you get partway done and you don't finish because that motivation that we thought we had, that's actually a burst of fear and desire, dries up because it's not a sustainable energy. And then you're left with half your closet still around your bedroom and you can't push yourself to complete it. That's very much tied to brain safety and getting that sustainable motivation by creating that safety for your brain. Laura says, the problem with jumping to a different project is that other projects seem just as important as the first one I started. I also have ADD. Yep, me too. I have ADHD, like hardcore. Like off the charts. And so I understand this hopping the projects and other ones seeming just as important, but I can guarantee you it worked for me, like life-changing. I can guarantee you that your brain is not feeling safe. So it's finding other things to feel just as important. So that's your brain's way of protecting yourself. It's a very human thing that goes on. So if we can figure out how to keep our brains safe and feeling safe so it can move on and get the sustainable motivation and energy, then that's what can see you through to the end of a project. And it does not mean that you sit down and you complete the project the first time you sit down to do it. But it does mean that you don't stress about having to go back to the project and you actually go back and finish the project rather than getting distracted by a bunch of other things. Susie says, I just joined the program. I definitely need to learn this before it rules my life. Thank you. Oh, yes. Yes. I can't wait to There's so much I want to tell you. I'm so exciting. I'm glad. I'm so glad. She says, it being my clutter and messiness. Yeah, you are in the right place. If you join the deep dive, then you will get the email with how to log in. And the first session was yesterday. So the replay is already there. So you can watch it right away. So today you will get that email. And it was so good. If I do say so myself, I really enjoyed it. And I'd love to hear what you think. So keep your eye out for that email with how to get to the replay. So we talked about how motivation it's not a starter. Motivation happens as a result of taking action. In order to get there, one of the things that can block us from getting to that action and truly getting lasting motivation is that safety, making our brain feel safe. Because when our brain stops feeling safe, the motivation dries up. That's why you're on a roll and then all of a sudden, boom, you lost your motivation and you don't know why. You're like, I was doing so great. What happened? This was so easy yesterday. Today it's a struggle because there's that something happened where your brain felt unsafe. So addressing the safety, making your brain feel safe so it can get to the clarity and the movement, and then that motivation kicks in. And it's like an engine. Once it kicks in and you're able to keep nurturing it by keeping that brain feeling safe, then it's powerful. You know, like a snowball where it just keeps building and building and building. The more you roll it, that's how your motivation can be. So that's what we want to do. We want to make sure that you get to that motivation and you can keep building it and stay in that safe place with your brain. And there are times where you're going to stumble and you're going to do something or think something, or your brain's just going to be your brain and it's going to go, nope, and it's going to feel scared. But if you know how to help bring it back to a feeling of safety, then you can get back on track. And then those projects don't lay around unfinished. You can actually get back to them and keep making progress without feeling like you have to constantly be pushing and pushing. So yeah, absolutely. Coral says, that's me. Brain freeze and feeling safe is right what I need to learn right now. How do you stay safe? Yeah, exactly. And staying safe, that, like we talked about, let me do a recap really quickly. So I can't go super deep into this. Like I said, this is like less than an hour long live. And so I can't go as deep as I do as in my regular programs, but some of the ways that motivation can, that you can feel safe so you can get to motivation, right? Safe engagement, safe action, not force, looks like doing less than you feel like you should do. Should is like one of those words that should never be in your vocabulary. So do less than you think that you should. Stopping on purpose. So giving yourself smaller bites, right? Touching something without finishing it. So sometimes it might be just taking a couple tiny small steps and then calling it a day and being okay with that. So not letting that voice kick in your head, criticizing yourself, but deciding that I'm touching this, I'm going to do just a tiny bit of it, and then I'm finishing it, or I'm not finishing it, and I'm walking away, and it's okay that it's not finished. That says nothing about who I am. And allowing an action to be boring or to be incomplete, right? Those are some ways that you can help get towards safety. There's so much more than that, but that's kind of the basic sky high view of that. So really good questions. I absolutely love it. Like I said, yesterday, in the deep dive series, we talked about, from that process, that foundation that I talked about, the understanding, safety, clarity, movement, motivation. We talked about what that was. And we talked more in depth about understanding and safety. We started to touch a little bit on clarity and movement and motivation, but we really focused on safety the most, because That's the part that nobody talks about, or even like most people don't even know about that part. But that's the part that once you can get a handle on it, even before you're good at it, once you start to dip your toe into that part, it can make such a huge difference. And it just snowballs and creates this chain of events, right? Then clarity and movement and motivation are so much easier. So we really talked a lot about the safety in that deep dive series. In that deep dive series, like I said, we already started it. Last night was our first live session. We have 5 total, 1 per month. If you still want to join it, you can. You will get the replay from last night that you can watch right away. And these are videos that you can keep forever. So you don't have to worry about having a specific time frame to watch it. But you will get the video, the replay. You can watch it. You can rewatch it as much as you want. And then next month will be the next live, and you would get a replay after that as well. You can attend live and or watch the replay. But there are 5 parts. And the beginning part is, we talked about understanding and safety last night. Next time, we will talk a bit more about the clarity, movement, and motivation parts. And we're going to deep dive into things like pressure and things like that. So that way we can create a new way of creating our motivation and actually seeing it through to the end with our projects. Sometimes even just starting projects. If you can't get started, then it's a huge safety flag for your brain. So with the deep dive series, we're really going into all that it takes, which is not that hard. It's just a lot of understanding what it takes to get started without such a struggle, and to keep making progress without such a struggle, and to finish without such a struggle. Because sometimes finishing is actually the scary part. It's what we want so badly, but it can also be really scary. So that's what the deep dive is talking about. So if you do want to really go in depth into that, then consider joining the deep dive for sure. Lori says, keeping piles of paper and notebooks next to my laptop keeps me feeling unsafe because I don't know what's in the piles. It's time to move things to the action file, so only the current project is in front of me. Oh my goodness, Lori. That is, like the kids say today, chef's kiss. Mwah. That is it. That is so, so, so good. Yes, yes, yes. All of the yeses. And I'm so excited to see how that helps you out. So yay. I love that. Yes. Lori says, finishing gives me a dopamine rush. You know what? Almost. It's not finishing that gives you the dopamine rush. It's progress. It's not finishing that gives you the dopamine rush. Progress is when dopamine shows up. And progress includes finishing. So we notice it when we finish. But have you ever had one of those days where you felt like you made a lot of progress on something? You didn't get to finish. You might not have even done as much as you wanted to, but you felt like you really did some solid work and you felt really good. That's dopamine, because when you have progress, you get dopamine. And when you get dopamine, that's very tied to motivation. It's tied to happiness. It's tied to confidence. So if we can keep making progress, whether we finish or not, if we can keep making progress, we're going to get the dopamine and it's going to keep on going, right? Yeah, I know. It's amazing, but it's so cool. Laura says, you're right. Progress does give me the dopamine rush. And if you keep making progress, you eventually finish without even trying, right? Because that's the eventual thing that happens. We're making progress towards a finish and finish gets there. But you can have dopamine along the way. You're just doing so amazing. I love you so much. I'm excited if you choose to join me in the deep dive, because this is just such a tiny, tiny sky high piece of what we talk about in the deep dive, which can just make such a huge difference without a lot of work. It's not a homework heavy, or even there's just not a whole lot that you have to do. It's just more, as you understand these things and get these aha moments, then you can start to just do little tiny things, slight shifts that can make big differences. And that's what I want for you. So I hope you join the deep dive. Pathfinders, I will see you at noon in about 15 minutes for our Pathfinder Thursday talk. And yeah, keep it up. One small step at a time without pressure and while giving yourself compassion, and you will absolutely get there. I love you so much. I'll talk to you very soon. Mwah! Bye, beautiful.